Hello and welcome. My name is Marjorie Esteville and I will be your host and moderator for this ADEIL conference session. Thank you for joining us for helping students achieve school, work, family life balance. Please welcome Oscar Lewis.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you here. I appreciate your joining us early on this wonderful Friday morning. This first slide is simply my glory page, and oh boy, and aren't I great? Whenever I start to think about that, I hearken back to one of the darker episodes in my life. I was a baseball umpire for 20 plus years, and I was invited to do a Pac-10 conference final at the University of Washington years ago. And I was doing very good till the final inning. I made a horrendous call. It was an epic failure. I had 1,500 people stand up and boo me. So whenever I start to feel too cocky, I always bring that memory back to a time where there was nothing to feel cocky about. Our objectives today are: how can we help students balance their work life, their school life, home life, and all the issues that are involved? Can we factor in the pandemic? How can we do more for our students? Is assessment something that affects the balance? And finally, is the balance of a work-life balance, is it a myth or is it really possible? I'm going to open with a quote from the vice chairman of CocaCola, who said, imagine life as a game where you're juggling balls: work, family, health, friends, spirit, or your psyche, your mental health, and you're keeping all these balls in the air. Work is a rubber ball. You can drop it, it will bounce back, and it shouldn't be too affected. But the others are glass balls, and you drop them, they can get scuffed, marked, marred in some fashion. They may even shatter. So it's important to realize that you've got all of these balls you're juggling, and some you do not want to drop simply because the results can be catastrophic. Add school into this category. Now you have 6 balls going. Luckily, like work, it's a bit of a rubber ball. William Penn, the guy who Pennsylvania is named after, said, time is what we want most, but what we use worst. And Alan Lakey, who wrote the book, How to Get Control of Your Time in Your Life, said, time is life. Therefore, you waste your time, waste your life. Master your time, you master your life. Here is what life sometimes feels like. Hey, welcome to my seminar on work-life balance. Let's review the priority list. So we have family, we have work, we have school, we have vacation and holidays, we have things we must do, medical issues we may need to take care of, eating, sleep, romance, all of that is out there. You have time for 3 of these, and work and holidays are 2. So out of the rest of the list, you get to pick 1. Now, we know life isn't quite that bad, but Sometimes it can seem that way. So how do we balance the demands on our time? First thing we do is set priorities. Everything is not a rush job, a number one priority. Some things we can delay, put on the back burner, and take our time in getting to it. Second is track your time. Every consultant in management that I've talked to said you become more efficient and effective when you track your time because you become aware of what you're spending your time doing. And it's just like a budget. You become more aware of your money when you start tracking what you're spending it on. Concentrate on one thing at a time. And believe me, I realize we all have distractions, but try and focus on one thing at a time, accomplish that, and move on. Schedule something you look forward to each day. In my case, I play a golf video game that I love, and I schedule time each day to do that. And my wife knows, my kids and grandkids know that I am going to be playing golf and to please let me have that 15 minutes to do with what I want. Respect your private time. Private time is your time. And you need to have time to yourself, away from everyone. Take a look at your personal habits and your general lifestyle. Are you doing things to keep yourself relatively healthy, safe, and doing the things that you need to be doing? And that's especially important right now as we're going through the pandemic. Ask for support. Support is always out there. You have friends, you have hopefully family, you have people, coworkers, you can ask for support. I know as an online teacher, sometimes you feel alone, that it's you and the students, but truly the school supports you in a number of various ways. Sometimes you just need to reach out and talk to people for academic help, technical help. Maybe you're having issues with a student has asked a question not in your area of expertise, but a school related question that you may not know, or it may be somewhat ambiguous in the student handbook. Set boundaries. Your time is your time, and people need to know that and not infringe on it. You need to learn to say no. You can't agree to do everything and maintain a healthy balance. And then evaluate how you're doing on a regular basis, monthly, quarterly, however you choose to do this. But sit back and take a look and see if maybe something is being is taking over your time that is a waster or is a user of your time that could be better spent doing something else. How do we do this practically? Well, under setting your priorities, we have in business as well as in math the 80-20 rule, which says 80% of your time is spent getting 20% of your result, and 20% of your time spending is spent getting 80% of your result. So prioritize your task against what your important goals are. Are you focusing on that 20% that's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck? Habits and lifestyle. We have the 4 Ds to overcome procrastination. And I can promise you, if there's someone who is the king of procrastination, it is me. I know how to delay things, and it's funny because I'm a financial professional and have worked with deadlines all my life, but I have found ways to delay doing other things that I should be taking into consideration. We can delete it. Are there consequences to doing nothing at all? Consider the 80-20 rule, and maybe what you're doing doesn't need to be done in the first place. Delegate it. Maybe the task is not something you're really responsible for. Maybe you can give it to somebody else. Do it now. If you postpone important tasks, all this does is build anxiety and stress. So handle the tough things early in the day as you possibly can. And that way you won't have this hanging over you. And finally, defer. If the task is something that can't be completed quickly, or it isn't a high priority, why don't you delay it until you have a better time to do it? Under habits and lifestyle, taking care of ourselves. Make sure you take time for yourself, mentally and physically. Take a break every couple of hours. There's a reason why at both manufacturers and retailers, they pull you off the floor for a break every 4 hours. And that is because you can't work 8 hours straight and maintain your focus and your positive attitude. You start to feel tired, get up and move around. Take a short break, refresh yourself, go get yourself something to drink. And also, on your diet, try to eat more than simply junk food. There are other things out there that are a little better for you and can keep you marginally healthier. Learning to say no. These tasks that people come to you with may be important to them, but conflict with your own goals. So you don't necessarily have the time for it. Let's say you have a couple of coworkers and they say, well, let's take a long lunch today and go to this new place that's on the other side of town. Well, that's great. But what happens if you don't have the time? What happens if you have a meeting, in 40 minutes? You really want to be at the meeting, so you can't go. You've got to be able to make this clear to other people. It's wonderful to be a team player. It really is. But you need to know how to be assertive, and if you can't do what they are requesting you to do at the moment. If you do want to do it, try and negotiate a deadline that both helps them achieve their goals while you don't sacrifice your own. Eliminating electronic time wasters. I told you in my case, it's a video game, but we have certain distractions that interrupt us and take away time. Some it's social media. Some people check their emails or their text. Don't check them continuously. Wait, and then devote a period of time to reading your emails, responding, and then get back to the task at hand. But you don't have to answer every text the moment it appears. Video games are wonderful to play, but just remember you have some other priorities out there, and you shouldn't be spending a vast amount of your time playing games. Dealing with the pandemic. The best advice you can get is try and stay positive. It's going to end at some point. But everyone, no matter how disciplined, upbeat, positive they are, life gets in the way and we have moments. I'm going to call it despair. It may not be as negative as despair, but there are things that happen that will impact us and bring down that positive feeling. I know one of my best friends, a guy I've known for 20 plus years, he just let on, he lost his job in 2015. And in a moment of crisis, he considered maybe his family would be better without him. Now, that's rather radical, but he talked about this with his family and his friends, and he got over it. But still, he did have a fleeting thought. And these kinds of things can come to us. So always stay upbeat. Try and recall a positive time, a good memory, a time when you were happy, and focus on that. We all know the pandemic's coming to an end. So, how do we help our students? First and foremost, let's talk about this in class, especially with new online students. Getting geared up for the online environment it isn't that it's hard, it's adapting to a new pace. And you need to make sure students are aware of this, new students are aware, and you need to be available. And you need to make some of your veteran students available so that people can talk to them. You know, if you're having a hard time getting through the reading and time to start answering the discussion questions timely, then ask for help. And everyone is generally willing to do this. If a new student is there and they answer the wrong question, or they are completely baffled by the question, you need to give them the guidance to stay on topic. There are some websites, one is here, but there's some websites in my references at the end that address how to better handle work-life balance. And take some time every day to talk to your support team. Encourage students to do this because their support team will bolster their attitudes when they hit a tough stretch. And it's important that students acknowledge this. They are not here alone. Yes, they are trying to better themselves, but there are people out there who are helping them every day, and students need to be able to acknowledge this. And the last thing I would say on this is encourage your students to walk at graduation. Graduation is such an important time for your support group. It's like a wedding. A wedding isn't for the couple, it's for their parents, it's for their friends and their relatives and a chance to get together. But the couple doesn't need a huge wedding. And you don't need a huge graduation. You know you've done it. But your support group needs to know it and needs to see the results of the time they spent supporting you and an affirmation of the work that they did to help you get to where you are. Does assessment play a role? Well, yes, it does. It plays a role in stress, and stress takes away balance. So encourage your students not to obsess about grades. And you need to understand life gets in the way. And we get announcements all the time. Be aware, students in the West are experiencing wildfires. This may impact some of the timeliness of their submission. We have hurricanes going on, or we have tornadoes, we have floods, whatever. Life gets in the way. A kid gets sick, or maybe a spouse gets sick, or a parent, and they have to rush and take care of that. I don't nitpick, and that is simply saying if a student has a minimum of a word count and they are a little short, I don't view that as a critical issue. You want to know mostly have they covered the topic completely. Maybe they're just clear and concise. And it's the same thing with timing. If something is due at midnight and they turn it in at 12:06, is that really a deal breaker? Is that really worth a 10% penalty for lateness? Under the letter of the law, it is. But I was taught when I first joined the online faculty that we should take into consideration the human factor, and perhaps missing a deadline by a few minutes or a word count by a few words is not a deal breaker. Always encourage your students to communicate with you on any issue, but especially technology issues. We are aware of weather events, but also look out for things that may not have been posted yet from on the school website. Maybe a hurricane is coming up the Atlantic coast and it's going to hit Florida quicker than it was originally anticipated. you need to make sure you're aware of this. You take this into consideration and you work with your students on this. But I'm going to say there's another side to this, and that is a student who waits until the very end of the term and comes to you and says, I need an A or I'm going on academic probation. That is not my problem. They should have let me know early so that we could work together. But if they have been doing B-level work all the weeks of the term and now all of a sudden want an A, that's not going to happen. Students have to take ownership of their work, and you need to make sure you're communicating this with them. Yes, be willing to work. Yes, go out of your way to help them if you can. But if they haven't taken any ownership up until the end, I'm sorry. That's on them, not on me. So it comes down to, is balance a myth or is it reality? Can you really compartmentalize things, or do they overlap? Well, you bet they overlap. Work can overlap with school. For example, you may be in a business course, and let's say you are studying something financial, and you want to get a perspective of it from someone who works in it, and you go to one of the financial managers or directors in your company, and you sit there and you talk to them. Well, all right, that is an overlap between your work and school. Yes, you're doing this for school, but you know, it's also taking work time both for you and the person you're asking. So always remember, you can't necessarily segregate everything. It just, life does get in the way. But if we set our priorities, we can balance our lives a little better. And always remember, we should take time for ourselves. Now, what I'd like to do is take a minute and open the floor for questions.
So I see in the chat we have a comment here, and it's from an Andini. She says, a good tip for new students taking their degree online is to enroll in the Ashford Champs Peer Mentoring Program offered by, well, Ashford. The program has helped me a lot in achieving my degree in organizational management. Champs is pretty awesome.
That is, you know, this also, this was an Ashford thing, but it can be shared somewhat. We had a multi-part series on, I'm going to call it homeschooling. It was basically, you've moved the school to your home as a result of the pandemic and how to handle that. And I went through that with my kids, so, because they had their grandkids or our grandkids at home and needed a little bit of support and help that way. There are things out there that can help students get acclimated. Were there any other questions, Margie?
Well, I don't see any at the moment.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, let me go through some of the resources we have.
And by the way, Mallory just posted those resources in the chat so that people can copy and paste those.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mallory. There are a number of sites on work-life balance. These are some of the better ones I found. There's a 14-step, an 8-step. Forbes has one on overcoming the destructive myth of work-life balance. Time management techniques is also a very good one. And time management is really what we're talking about. What we need, in addition to the subjects that we're teaching, we need to make sure we teach, especially the newer students or the incoming students, about time management, because that is absolutely critical in a distant learning environment. We're compressed. You've got a lot of reading. You've got a lot of research to do in a relatively compressed time frame. So they need to learn how to manage their time so that they aren't constantly obsessing at the last minute to get something in and done that perhaps is not their best work. Alan Laking's book on getting control of your time in your life is really a good one. And I would encourage you also, if you do have a question later on, I am available. And you can certainly ask me, and I will be happy to work with you on whatever it is that you need to continue moving forward.
And Oscar, we still have another couple of minutes. I'm really curious to hear more on this destructive myth of work-life balance. It sounds pretty dire, and I've wondered more about that. Could you just elaborate a bit?
Well, people at first, when this early on was being talked about, people were frankly trying to do too much. They were trying to take the 24-hour day and almost get a day stretcher so that they could accomplish everything that day. But you really don't have to get things done in one day. There's a lot of things, tasks that are work, school related, even family related, that can be done over time. And this is where the destructive part came in, with people trying to get everything done right now, as opposed to prioritizing and setting things out logically. In a way, it's like a company with a plan of where they want to be in 5 years and saying, well, we'll get it all done in year one. And yes, that'd be wonderful if you could, but perhaps there are things that build on something else. That's why in some classes, especially our advanced classes, we have prerequisites. You've got to take something before taking another class because that is a building block. And that is the same thing that happens in our lives. We would love to get everything done right away. But
by the way, we've got 2 more questions, maybe 3. With
right.
that you're talking about dovetailing, that you might want to continue. John Ivins, who used to be on ground faculty at the original Ashford University in Clinton, Iowa, he said, should there be an upper limit of working hours? Yes, we would hope. And also, can a student deal with online study in a 60-hour plus work week? And then while I'm at it, let me also read Allison McLetchie's email chat question, who says, how many people have tried to get students to prepare time usage sheets? I've asked my students to prepare them, and none of them have even done it, though I share with them my own. Now, mid-semester, they're all struggling with deadlines and asking extensions. And then Beth Andolino says, how much personal time should be allocated each day? That's a great question. And just so I can get this in before we have time, let me do that, and then I'll read the next question. But those 3 kind of dovetailed with what you're talking about right now.
Yes, I have had students with long work weeks, the 50 to 60-hour work weeks. And frankly, it's hard to do a good job with school. You have to set your priorities. The student, my most recent student who had this, was generally late and would submit most of his work on Sundays, whether it was discussions or his papers. But he did get penalized for being late on his discussions. But he and I talked about it, and he explained to me, and I didn't deduct the full 10%, even though he was late, simply because this was something outside of his control. It's the same thing we go through with military students. And perhaps one of them gets jerked out on a 4-day training exercise, and they're in the middle of Fort Irwin or maybe some other remote location where there's zero internet and or phone service, and they can't do the work. I view the faculty's job as working with people, and we have to make sure that while we have guidelines set out in black and white,